Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is CJ and I just got done doing the 600-mile service on my 2022 CBR1000RR, and I thought in this video we could go through it and show you guys what that looks like. So I'm kind of a terrible motorcycle daddy. I was supposed to do this service at 600 miles, but I ended up doing it at 618 miles. So I'm feeling pretty terrible about that. But I think it's going to be okay, and maybe I'll just do my next service a little early to make up for it. The 600-mile service on this bike is pretty standard. It's an oil change and a chain cleaning and adjustment. The dealer that I bought this motorcycle from, SF Moto in San Francisco, they actually include a free 600-mile service when you buy the motorcycle from them. And I guess it's not really a free service. I mean, I did just buy a motorcycle from them, but still nice of them to offer though. However, I much prefer to do it myself. Now, to get to the drain plug and the oil filter, you really just need to take the lower fairings off, but I always like to take this opportunity to take the upper fairings off too and be able to clean up under the fairings and wipe up and get rid of all the dirt and dust that collects that you normally can't get to. In fact, when I took this one off, I had quite a few bugs that fell out. I counted 3 yellow jackets that fell on the garage floor when I was removing the fairings. Now, I mentioned in my last video, I had a 2012 Yamaha R1, and it's really difficult for me to not compare this bike to that bike, especially since they're the only 2 bikes that are basically in the same class that I've ever owned. But to get the fairings off that bike, I think it was just 3 screws along the top of the upper fairing. I think 2 plastic clip screws on the inside of the fairing, and I think literally just 1 screw that attached the upper fairing to the lower fairing. And then once you loosened all that, the thing just came right off. You literally just lifted it off, no resistance, no clips to worry about. I wasn't worried about bending anything, and I didn't have to sit there and scratch my head for a minute trying to figure out how to get it off. Just to get these pieces off, there was actually, I think, 6 different sizes and types of screws. But it wasn't so bad. The only really annoying one, and one that kind of surprised me since I didn't see this screw, is when you go to lift off the upper fairing, there's actually a screw that's screwing that body panel onto one of the inside fairings. And I couldn't see that, and I couldn't really figure out a way to get to it without holding the panel away from the motorcycle and unscrewing it that way. Otherwise, it's kind of braced up right against your exhaust headers, and I don't see any other way to get to that screw. So that was a little silly, of course, but ultimately not that bad. It probably took me about 10 or 15 minutes to figure out how to get all this off. And now that I know how to do it, now that I've gone through it before, next time I do it, it should be much, much, much quicker. I needed to get my wife's help getting the motorcycle up on the front wheel stand. Normally this thing should be braced up against a wall or something, but the way my shop is set up right now, this is not really an option. And it was kind of adorable. She was totally freaked out that I was about to drop it. It made her really nervous for some reason, but I appreciated her help, and luckily we didn't drop it. I got this thing strapped down, and then it was time to run the engine for a little bit and heat up the oil. Your first oil change is always going to be a little bit gross and dark. Before your piston rings set up against the inside of the cylinder walls, you're going to get a little bit of exhaust that does blow through, and that obviously dirties up your oil and makes it look really, really dark. I will say though, it's actually quite amazing how far we've come in the last 20 years, how much better machining has gotten, and how pretty close to broken in these machine parts are when you first buy a motorcycle. I think the first 2 or 3 motorcycles I've owned, it was perfectly normal and expected to get little shiny bits of metal flakes in your engine. Essentially, as the engine was breaking in, and all the mechanical pieces were rubbing against each other, smoothing each other out. It was totally normal for little bits of metal to come off your components and come out in your oil. So it's pretty nice that that's not a thing anymore. Now, speaking of comparing this motorcycle to the R1 that I had, I love that on this bike, the oil filter is right there. Can't miss it, right in your face, easy to get to. On the R1, the oil filter was actually tucked in on the other side of the motorcycle, essentially, but it was behind the exhaust headers. So not only did you burn yourself just getting to the oil filter, unless you're wearing gloves or something, but it was pretty much expected to get oil all over your exhaust. Now, I did quite a few oil changes on that bike, and I think a couple of times I managed to get the filter out. And then when I removed the filter from the bike, I had it tilted up, and then I managed to get the filter out from behind the exhaust headers without dropping it. And even when I did that, though, there was still quite a bit of oil that came out from where you removed the filter. And of course, that got all over your exhaust pipes too. So it was basically a pointless effort. Every time I did an oil change on that thing, no matter how much I tried to clean it up and wipe it down, whenever you started the engine for the first time, all of that oil that was sitting on your exhaust would burn off and smell horrendous. So anyways, that's definitely a point in favor of the CBR versus the 2012 R1 that I own. So I'm kind of a Motul fanboy, and I definitely like putting synthetic oil in my motorcycles. Plus, this one looks pretty cool. It's literally red, so it kind of feels like you're giving your motorcycle a blood transfusion or something, which is pretty fucking metal, if you ask me. Now, you want to take care and ensure that you get the right amount of oil in your motorcycle. There's a range, so you don't have to get it perfect by any means. But having not enough engine oil is definitely not a good thing. But having too much can also be really bad. Not only do you run the risk of increasing oil pressure in your engine to the point where that oil will try to escape somewhere through a gasket or a seal somewhere, but you can also have the connecting pins on your crankshaft slap against the oil repeatedly, introducing air into your oil and essentially turning your engine oil into a foam-like consistency. I mean, have you ever made whipped cream before? Or beaten egg whites and turned that into a foam once you've aerated that? You can imagine if you've done that to your oil, then it wouldn't really lubricate your engine components very effectively. Now, I just got done singing the CBR's praises for their oil filter placement, but I absolutely hate the dipstick. I really miss just having that little window where you can peek inside and check your oil level. So Honda engineers, no more dipstick, please. All right, engine oil is complete, and now it's time to clean the chain. Cleaning your chain is obviously pretty gross and obviously something you want to do outside. You need a good chain cleaner and a chain brush. And after you let the chain cleaner sit on there and breaking up all of the grime and grease for about a minute or so, you want to thoroughly brush both the inside and outside of your chain, both front and back, to really clean out all of that crap that builds up on your chain. It seems that the general consensus is that you should just wipe your grime and cleaner off your chain, but I'm a big fan of giving it a thorough rinse and just washing all that stuff off. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but it can't be good for your chain to leave the cleaner and solvent on it, and especially after you ride it next, having that fling all over various parts in your motorcycle. I don't know. That can't be good. After you rinse, though, you want to give your motorcycle a good wipe down, and if you have an air compressor, then you should definitely load that thing up and blow dry your motorcycle as well as you can. In fact, there's a lot of reasons why you should have an air compressor in your garage or your shop, not even related to motorcycle maintenance. So yeah, if you don't have one yet, that's definitely kind of a must-have in your arsenal of tools. Now that the chain is all clean, it is time to get my bald head out of the sun because sunburns are they're just not fun. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, now that the fairings are off and the bike is sitting up on its rear stand, I like to go through and clean up and wipe down as much as I can on the motorcycle. Not only does it keep the bike looking fresh and looking nice, but dirt and dust actually holds on the moisture. And so when your bike is dirty and your bike gets a little bit wet, like you ride it through a foggy morning or you get caught in the rain, etc., that moisture's gonna sit on your various components longer before drying off, and that's gonna cause corrosion and rust. So you should definitely try to keep your motorcycle clean. When you wax your chain, you should spray the wax on the inside of the chain. If you spray the outside of the chain, you're just gonna get more wax that flings outwards when you ride it next. Adjusting your chain is pretty straightforward actually. So you have a bolt that is in your swing arm, and when you unscrew it, when you screw it out, it actually pushes your rear axle backwards, which tightens your chain. Then you have these little indicator lines which help you keep the axle straight, so you make sure it's in the same place on both sides. Let's take a minute to talk about why it's important to maintain the proper amount of slack on your chain. I'd like to point out 3 important spots. The first one being where your swing arm mounts to your frame. The second one being the center of your front sprocket, and lastly, the center of your rear sprocket. Now, if you look at those 3 points, you can see that it actually makes a triangle. Now, it's not a very pronounced triangle on this bike. It actually differs from bike to bike, but it is a triangle nonetheless. Now, because of this, when you're out riding your motorcycle and you hit a bump or something, and that causes your rear suspension to compress, that'll raise your rear wheel and actually increase the distance between your front sprocket and your rear sprocket. Now, if there's not enough slack to compensate for this and your chain is too tight, you potentially run into 2 different problems. Number 1, you increase the wear on your chain links and bearings, which causes your chain to get even longer, and you wear out the bearings, which decreases the life of your chain. But you can also cause your countershaft seal to wear out much quicker and end up leaking engine oil behind your front sprocket. As you can imagine, that is not a cheap or easy fix. Before you start to adjust your chain, you want to loosen the rear axle nut. So you're going to need to get out a big old torque wrench. Then you want to test out your free play, and it's pretty common to find a label on your swing arm with the free play specifications. And as you can see here, pushing your rear axle backwards with the adjuster bolt just a tiny bit does tighten the chain pretty drastically. Be sure to take your time here and get it right. You can loosen the adjuster bolts and kick your rear tire forward if you need to start over. And be sure to do this adjustment with your rear tire on the ground and your bike on the side stand. If you have the bike up on the rear stand, you may get an inaccurate reading and get your chain too tight. And before you tighten your rear axle nut back up, it's actually really important that you get the proper torque specifications. So get yourself a torque wrench if you don't have one and look up how tight it should be. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, with the fairings off, I think this is a great opportunity to really clean the heck out of everything and get all of those places that you normally wouldn't be able to get to with the bike put together. Once I knew how the fairings came apart, it was actually pretty straightforward putting it back together. Though it's pretty interesting on these modern motorcycles, the way the fairings are designed and how they all fit together. The fitment on them is actually pretty impressive. Comparing this to some of my older motorcycles that I've had, if you look closely at the older sport bikes, the fairings are kind of sort of bolted on and suspended. The way everything fits when it's all put back together actually looks really nice. I think there was some pretty serious engineering that went behind putting these together. Though there are a couple of fitments on here that were a little annoying. The way they all kind of clip together, this piece has to go over that piece, but an inch over, it has to go under that piece. It's quite a bit different than my older motorcycles where you just sort of held up the fairings and screwed it in. And here's that screw I was talking about earlier where you can't really get to it without holding the fairing away from the motorcycle. You also can't see it from here, but there's actually a piece of plastic in front of my finger there, so you can't access the screw from the front. All told, it really just took me a few minutes to get the fairings all back together. And all told, I had a lot of fun working on this today. I want to thank all of you for watching. I know it's been almost a couple weeks since my last video came out. I was hoping to do a video every single week, but life has been a little crazy lately, and so I had to find time to work on this project and edit the video and get this all out for you guys. But I really hope you guys enjoyed. Um, hopefully either you learned something today or just thought it was interesting watching a bike getting torn down and worked on and put back together. I don't know about you, but I can actually watch this kind of content all day. So anyways, thanks again for watching. I have some ideas for a few upcoming videos. I'm actually thinking about purchasing the quick shifter and getting that installed and recording that and making a video out of it. So hopefully that's something I can get ordered here pretty soon. I really think this motorcycle should have come with a quick shifter, but that's something that I'll probably complain much more about in that video. All right, everyone, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.